Hello, welcome to the Middle East Talk. And today's our guest is Jason SHVILI, Canadian author and writer, and especially about affairs of Israel and Middle East. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, Robin. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good to see you. Good to have
Good.
you over here.
Yep.
Jason, what happened since the last night, as we heard on the news that the Israeli hostages being released once the President Trump landed Israel. I know like over 20 people so far have been released from over 700 days, over little over two
There
years.
was there were 20 hostages that were confirmed to be alive, and they've all been released now. What we haven't gotten yet is the bodies of the hostages that tragically did not survive. We haven't gotten all of those, all of the remains yet. And what's really worrying is that some people out there are saying that they might never be found, and that's um, honestly, neither of us can imagine what that must be like for their families. Obviously,
Jason, how many number of the people deceased we're talking about? As I heard from the U.S. media, 4 people has been retrieved, their remains been retrieved, but there are more, right?
there are more. Yes, there are 28. There were 48 hostages left before the ceasefire went into effect. 20 of them were alive, and thankfully they're all home. And you might have seen the jubilant celebrations. And these people reunited with their families for the first time in 2 years. After basically existing in a living hell for 2 years in Hamas dungeons. And the other 28 unfortunately did not survive, and the remains under this agreement are supposed to be returned to us as in addition to the living hostages. That hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure if that will affect the agreements, but so far, despite the fact that these remains have not been turned over yet, I think as we speak that the Israel is starting to release 2,000 terrorists or terrorist suspects in exchange for our hostages, and about 250 of these terrorists are people who have been basically convicted of murder, of slaughtering Israelis, and they were given life sentences, and now they're getting out scot-free.
Jason, as I remember, that's not the first time happening. As I remember, 20 years ago, there was a single soldier in Gaza, I think Gilad Shalit or something.
Yes, that's correct.
Over one
yes.
guy and being 1,000 people in exchange, right?
Yeah, basically, a lot of them
So
were
that's
murderers.
very often happen in Israel, one having to get the reach deal with the Palestinian authorities or Hamas. So it's not the first time happening.
No, it's not the first time that's happened. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the prisoners released during the Shalit deal was Yahya Sinwar, who was up until the IDF eliminated him, was the leader of Hamas in Gaza and the main architect behind the October 7th massacre.
Gotcha. Jason, have another question. So the broader agreement with the involving of the Arab countries, Gulf countries, President Trump and Israel. So can you just simply, what was the deal? So what Israel get it for it, and what Americans or Arabs is gonna be part of that deal? And there is like as I remember many times, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that there is the way to annexation of that land to the Israel, because they are not going to let the Hamas the govern again. So, but what we're seeing from part of this agreement, Hamas is going to kind of stay over there. So, what is the deal? Like, could you just mention people of them?
Well, in the short term, as we've seen, we get our hostages, and that is a huge victory for us, because that was one of our 3 main objectives in the war. Just to refresh everybody's memory, if they don't know, the 3 main objectives of the Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza was to free the hostages, destroy Hamas, and make sure that Gaza is never a threat to Israel in the future. Now, so of course we've got our hostages back. and that's one of the 3 goals. So that's a great victory for us. Although I'll add that that in exchange we had to release 2,000 terrorists and terrorist suspects, hundreds of whom are people serving life sentences for slaughtering Israelis. But the other two goals of the war effort are still up in the air. Clearly, this is not the decisive victory that Prime Minister Netanyahu kept talking about during the course of the war, because if it was a decisive victory, we wouldn't be releasing 2,000 terrorists. Hamas would surrender unconditionally, and we would get our
what's the deal that Hamas is going to get dismantled, or Turkey or Egypt or any other Arab country is going to be on the ground?
Actually, it's kind of funny, because the deal is they have to disarm, but nowhere in that agreement does it say who is going to disarm them. So so it's they're not going to disarm on their own. They've already said repeatedly that they're not going to disarm. So and the other thing about that is some of the Arab countries will not send their own forces into Gaza until Hamas is disarmed. So this is highly unlikely, if not impossible. So the rest of this agreement is still really up in the air. Its chances of succeeding, to be perfectly honest, are very slim.
So what we're seeing, I know that the involvement of the Qatar and Turkey, especially, they're pressuring on Hamas to release this hostage and get on deal, right? So what the U.S. media is mentioning that most likely some Turkish forces and some the Qataris or some from the Gulf states will be on the ground as a kind of peacekeeper to disarm the Hamas, or just rotating the transition after the Hamas. But
my understanding is, sorry to interrupt you. My understanding is that some of the Gulf states will not send forces to Gaza until Hamas is disarmed, and we certainly cannot rely on Qatar, Egypt, or Turkey to disarm Hamas, because they're basically, Turkey and Qatar host Hamas leaders.
The Israeli delegation was very happy with the Qatari delegation getting those agreements. That what we saw on the media.
You know what? On the surface, everybody's happy, but behind the scenes, I don't think any Israelis are happy with the extent that this agreement involves Qatar and Turkey, and to a lesser extent Egypt. In fact, there was a Saudi official, I recently read this last night, there was a Saudi official that was saying, and I can't remember, possibly Bahraini and UAE officials saying, you can't have Qatar involved in this plan, because Qatar will bring Hamas back as Gaza's rulers, because they sponsor Hamas. Next to Iran, they are Hamas's biggest sponsors. And Turkey, no slouch themselves. They've hosted Hamas leaders, and Turkey, Qatar, and Hamas all share the same Muslim Brotherhood ideology. So none of them are trustworthy. And I think the reason Trump.
Jason, I have another question regarding the Qatari issue. So in the U.S., what I'm seeing as an American on the ground. So, and from the first term of the President Trump, he was clearly against Qatar and Qatari's money. And many times, as I recall, from 2017 and 18, Trump many times called the Qatar is sponsoring terrorism, especially the Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan Muslimin. Yeah. But lately, especially nowadays, we're seeing President Trump's stance towards the Qatar is changing in the favor of the Qatar. So even though there is a new deal that the Qatari is going to have kind of military training base in the U.S. itself, in the U.S. soil, that's going to be first Arab country ever existed. It's going to have kind of debate. So what I'm seeing, there are two fractions in Trump base. The one is which is being like really those people are enjoying with flowing of the Qataris money, and others are firmly against of them. But what I'm seeing, the Qatar's influence over Trump administration is growing.
It is very strong. The Qatari administration on the Trump administration, the Qatari influence on the Trump administration. I actually wrote an article a couple of weeks ago. You can find it in the you might be able to find it in the Jewish News Syndicate if you Google my name. and it talks about why Qatar is in fact not an ally of the U.S. And to make a long story short, Qatar is a sponsor of terrorism. And yes, they do have a lot of influence, too much influence with the Trump administration. In fact, a lot of people would say that Trump himself is in Qatar's pockets, basically. And he's not the only one. Stephen Witkoff, Trump's frontman and his special envoy in the Middle East, the FBI director, and at least a couple of other high up Trump officials have worked with
Tom Barak, special envoy to Syria and ambassador of Turkey.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes. Tom Barak is certainly not on the side. Certainly is not on the side of the Kurds, and in fact, he rejected. He is in line with President Ashara in rejecting Rojava's demands for autonomy. He doesn't, he actually said federalism is not going to work in Syria. It's good. It's good. It's great for the U.S., but it's not going to work for Syria. I can tell you right now that he's right. Federalism is not going to work in Syria. The only thing that's going to work, and the only way there's going to avoid major bloodshed in the future, is a partition. And again, this is an article that an article of mine that you recently read, because these multi-ethnic states that were forcibly put together by Western colonial powers just don't work. Okay, you name it: Syria, Iraq, Lebanon. All these countries have had civil wars, revolutions, all sorts of violence and atrocities, because they were never meant to be countries. Okay. They were never meant to be nation states.
So before the jump to the Rojava in Syrian Kurdistan and about SDF deal with the new al-Shara regime, I would like to have a few more questions about Israeli reaching deal with the Arabs, and especially about Hamas. And after that, I would like to back to the Kurdistan, especially what an Israeli perspective on, especially in Syria and Syrian Kurds, and approach of the Israeli government, the Kurds in Syria, as the same approach as for Druze in south of Syria. So what we know, like what does the deal that's being get, you think there is a near future it's going to be any stabilization in Gaza, like any human relief, any international helps, funding to constructions, so on? Or you believing the agreement is kind of still on the air, thin air? You never know what's going to be in the next day.
There's, according to this agreement that Trump conjured up, there's supposed to be a lot of international help for financing and financing the reconstruction of Gaza, but it's not likely to materialize if Hamas is still there. And right now, Hamas is still, thousands of terrorists have been destroyed. Most of their military infrastructure is gone, but there's still a force there. And right now, and as soon as the ceasefire was announced, Hamas redeployed 7,000 terrorists, 7,000 of their own terrorists, to try to regain control.
With the uniform, they are not anymore civilian. I saw that. But the question that if Hamas is not going to disarm, and there is no forces to get them disarmed, according to this agreement, so what's going to be the next move of Israel?
I think that conflict will conflict will eventually resume if nothing is done to disarm Hamas. It's just Israel is not going to allow a de facto terrorist state on its border. And because
Jason, it's been 2 years, and what the Prime Minister Netanyahu promised in the beginning of this operation, and so far it doesn't seem to be really been achieved on the ground. So like resuming this conflict, which is like international pressure, because Hamas is clearly using the people, civilians, as a human shields, and there are catastrophic of the civilian loss because of the Hamas. So it is continuing to do this. So it is really very fragile across the globe, not only in the Middle East and across the globe. So how long if Israel can really, face with this international pressure, and also on the ground, Israel's kind of not really succeed what they promised in the beginning of this war. Hamas is still there.
Yeah, yeah, it's no, you're absolutely right. We have not the two goals of destroying Hamas and making sure that Gaza is no longer a threat. We have not yet achieved those goals, and Prime Minister Netanyahu reluctantly, I think, is banking on this, or is giving a chance for this agreement that President Trump has drawn up to try to accomplish these two other goals. But quite frankly, I don't think it's really going to work. And the other thing, and so Israel might not have any choice but to resume conflict at some point. I don't know if it'll be in the next few weeks or the next few months, but if there is not a way to dismantle Hamas and dismantle its remaining infrastructure in Gaza.
From Israeli perspective, you think the lesson is being learned? Like Israel now know that, like in 2005, when they hand over the entire Gaza, and even though they take, I don't recall the number, but over 20,000 of settlements, the people has been forced.
We had about, I can't remember how many people we had.
Israel is going to avoid the same mistake, or Israel is going to?
Yes, absolutely. We will never. I don't think Israel will ever give up more. I don't think Israel will, or at least Israel should never give up more land. And this whole land for peace thing, that's done. That's over. Not even.
So what are you saying after 7th of October? The Israeli approach towards the Middle East neighbor countries, which was based on the giving them land back, which is happening in south of Lebanon, which is happening Sinai Peninsula, which is happening in some part of the Golan Heights, and which is happening in Gaza and West Bank. So Israel was trading to the land with a peace. But what we have seen, it does not work.
No, it doesn't work at all. In fact, it's very dangerous. And October 7th proved just how dangerous it is to give land to people who are still radicalized, who are still dead set on destroying us. And
another question, as I know, one of the very military fortification of the border in the Middle East between Egypt and Gaza.
Yeah,
I think it's about 15 kilometer the wide, and it's been like double-sided wall and very deep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know what?
Why did Israel didn't do the same thing to protect its own civilians and around?
Well, actually, we did. We've done something similar. We had quite a defensive perimeter in Gaza. Unfortunately, it wasn't effective. Tragically, it wasn't effective in preventing Hamas from attacking southern Israel 2 years ago. There are very hard lessons that Israel has.
Israel resumed the military action. You think in the near future Israel going to do the same wall that Egypt did on the Gaza's border?
Well, we actually do have. If you know about this was a big deal a long time ago when we started building it, but we have a massive wall or security perimeter, a fence in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, to keep out to keep terrorists out.
That wasn't only about that. As I remember, in early 2000, there was many suicide bomb attack in 2002, 3, 4, and after those build of this wall, those suicide attack is being reduced like drastically.
Absolutely, yes. That fence, as much as people opposed it, that fence has saved lives. It has saved lives. We don't have the number of attacks we've had since we built the fence is extremely diminished. But at the same time, I would caution that I think Israel has to stop hiding behind fences. Fences only. Fences. They're not a good long-term strategy to deal with people that want to destroy you.
So Jason, what are you suggesting after 7th of October? Israel took initiative towards the Yemen, towards the Hamas, towards the Hezbollah in Syria. So what are you saying? If Israel want to be safe and secure, has to be avoid and has to be in first place, not behind of its own walls, has to be front of the walls.
We have to be on the offensive. Okay, for a long time, in Israel, our doctrine was to hit the enemy hard before they could hit us, and hit and hit them so hard they remember what happened, and they don't do it again.
And the Assad regime was very weak after like 15 years of the domestic war. So question, now the new regime is pro-Islamic, and they are directly under influence of Turkey and Qatar. So I know right now this regime is not posing threat to Israel because it cannot. And right after the regime change, Israel has conducted over 800 bombardment towards the Syrians and naval base and military bases and airports, so on. So to make weaker and weaker to the Islamic regime. But if Israel is not going to see the reality, which is repeatedly happening in Gaza, in Lebanon, and what's going to be really save Israel to the face another the danger, but this time it's bigger danger from Syrian Islamic regime?
First of all, the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government did a very good thing after the Assad regime fell. Our military went inside of Syria on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, and we set up some. We have set up sort of. We want to make southern Syria demilitarized, so it's not a threat to us. Now there is the possibility in the future of a security arrangement between Israel and Syria, but Israel, Israel is not going to, at least I'm hoping. First of all, the Golan Heights is non-negotiable. Israel is not giving that up under any circumstances. And Israel,
Jason, you mean the new part of the Golan Heights, like a Mount Herron, is being?
Well, I'm not saying. No, we're not going to. I'm saying that the Golan Heights that Israel annexed in 1980, I believe 81, 82, if I off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, that we won't give up. What Israel is willing to do is withdraw the troops from that we have now in southern Syria, but only if southern Syria is demilitarized. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure.
When you say the southern Syria, so I have a question. The first question: Israel was set up to protect the Druze. So as is a bad thing, the Druze region, Suwaida, is like roughly 40-45 kilometers away from the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
The nearest Israeli forces are 45 kilometers from the Druze region. So there is a Dara, which is the Iraq tribesmen are mostly populated. So if Israel continue to protect Druze and their rights, and as Israel did last couple months against of those genocide attempt towards the Druze minorities, so in one point Israel have to have secure those lands to reach the Druze. So you think if the Gaza is being settled down, Israel has any priorities to annex this land, to not by the military, but at least to making any connection between Druze Suwaida to the Israeli border, Golan Heights?
I don't think annexation of territory is on Israel in southern Syria is on Israel's agenda right now, but protecting the Druze certainly is. And although it's interesting you asked, because there are actually some Druze villages on the border with Israel that actually sort of requested that they be annexed to Israel. But right now, as far as I know, Israel has no plans to annex additional territory in Syria.
Then how the Israel is going to protect the Druze? Because Druze
for starters, there are, and again, this is unconfirmed, and I have no way of verifying this, but there are reports that Israel is providing the Druze with weapons, and I think it should. This is just me, but I think it should go beyond that. I think we ought to be stationing Israeli troops in Jabal Druze, in the Druze area itself, because I don't think anybody will touch the Druze if Israeli troops are there. And but the problem is now Israel's under immense pressure right now from President Trump, and he has an agenda in the Middle East, and unfortunately, he has cozied up to President Bashar, and not knowing what kind of danger this man poses to Syria, Israel, and particularly the Kurds, Druze, and other minorities in Syria. Unfortunately,
now before we jump to the Kurdish situation in Syria, I know the Kurds are under pressure from the Trump administration, especially under military invasion threat by Turkey to get on deal with Damascus. And what I'm seeing, what the Turkey, Qataris, and Tom Borak, U.S. special envoy to Middle East Syria, it's regarding Kurds. It's asking for Kurds to kind of surround to the Damascus regime. So, and there is another thing. The most of the Kurds in Syrian Kurds especially was asking and expecting why Israel is not clearly supporting them as Israel did for Druze. For example, Israel could have been struck the Syrian National Army, which is under Turkish control, especially of Syria, which is like proxies of Turkey during those all years. I'm not talking about the Al-Shara's forces. I'm talking about those forces directly belongs to the Turkish regime. So we haven't seen Israel clearly like and openly strike any of their positions around the Kurdish inhabitants areas.
Well, I think I'm honestly disappointed that Israel has not been as active in supporting the Kurds in North and Northeast Syria as they have been with the Druze. One aspect of that, there are a couple of reasons why, and they're not reasons that I would give, but one reason is that there's a very large Druze community in Israel, and they're very loyal to the state of Israel. They serve in the military. They're extremely loyal to the state, and so Israel feels obligated because of that to protect fellow Druze in Syria. There is obviously a Kurdish community in Israel, but it's a Kurdish Jewish community. Now, unfortunately, the Kurds are significant distance further from Israel than the Druze, so it's harder logistically for Israel to support the Kurds as it supports as much as they support the Druze. But I think Israel is more than capable of supporting directly supporting Rojava more if it wanted to. And I honestly would like
all Kurds was asking during this period to having like protection by air power. So and this could be like strike those jihadist positions around Aleppo, around Afrin, or right across to the Euphrates rivers. So that was another reason the Kurds are broader Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan, in Turkey, in Iran, or even in diaspora Kurds are questioning why do Kurds are not step up to cooperation with state of Israel, because we haven't seen such a development from sincerely from state of Israel that is going to at least protect the Kurds, and when it comes to that matter. Because
I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have a good explanation for why Israel isn't supporting the Kurds more. I really wish we were. Your guess is as good as mine. I think one reason, and I'm just speculating here, is that Israel doesn't want to get in the way of Trump's agenda. And so if we directly give the Kurds more direct support, we might be in danger of upsetting the Trump administration, and maybe that's why the Israeli government is not.
I got that point, but my question is that like Israel have been trying to do the peace deal with all the Arab states in so far last 45 years especially. So it's so far that's all been failed. So that's mean Israel need to drastically change its politics towards the neighboring countries.
It hasn't failed now. It hasn't failed entirely. Now we gave up land for peace with Egypt. We have a peace treaty with Egypt. It's a very, I'd say, especially now, it's a pretty shaky one. But I think now we made agreements with in Trump's first term with 4 different Arab nations, and we didn't trade and we didn't trade back, and we didn't trade any land for peace with them. So that is the new formula, I think, that we need to go by. Israel needs to be through, and I think we are through.
At one point, Muslim Brotherhood was in power in Syria, in Egypt.
In Egypt, yes.
So that what I'm trying to say you right now, what we're seeing, we were talking about 2017 and 18, the U.S. will designated Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
From that point to now, we're seeing a huge influence of the Muslim Brotherhood towards the U.S. and capital in D.C. So what I'm saying, like, a state of Israel can read this threat, like, does Muslim Brotherhood expansion in D.C. an influence towards the Trump administration? It's growing and growing. So this is what I'm seeing as an American. So that's like a very concern for me, because at the same time, as a Kurdish American, so
absolutely
growing up about what's going to be the Kurds, and
it's a very dangerous situation. And quite frankly, I don't know how either Jews or Kurds or anybody else can counter the Qatari influence in the Trump administration. There are people in the Trump administration that are fortunately and who are support the Trump administration who are not influenced by Qatar, and these are but off the top of my head, I'm not sure who they are, but not everybody in the Trump administration, and not everybody in general in the Republican Party is in Qatar's pocket. But Qatar, because of they have money to burn, they can basically, their strategy has basically been to buy everybody off. A few months ago they gifted I can't remember, actually, maybe longer than that, but you might recall that Qatar gifted Trump a $400 million luxury jumbo jet. Okay, so this is a country of just 300,000 citizens that basically buys influence whenever.
So that when the Jelani wasn't here in New York for United Nations meeting attending, so we saw like Qatari's Emir was with him during that time, and also Qatari's delegation and Qatari's media. And those the former CIA director like David Petros and others, they spend millions and millions of dollars for having those influence on U.S. politics, U.S. media, and capital. Even the either side of the A's are like Democrats and Republicans. I saw that like they really throw like millions and millions of dollars. So I saw that the influence, how they are polishing the al-Shara as a new regime, new leader, as a hope of the unified Syria. So this is what they are selling right now and over here. But my thing is about that, like if the Israel cannot read this situation carefully, what's going to be the cost of that in the near future? Think about it. If the Kurd will get disarmed, or Kurd will be forced to be part of Syrian army and somehow, and that it can be used against of Israel own security or interest, and not maybe now, but who's going to guarantee in the near future ain't going to happen then?
Well, I can tell you right now that the only thing that is preventing the Kurds of Rojava from getting slaughtered is the presence of U.S. troops in that area. They still have a few hundred troops there. Trump wants them withdrawn totally, and if that happens, there's nothing, there's nothing really that the Kurds have. The Kurds in Rojava, they have arms, they have the ability to fight back, but against Turkey, which has the second largest army in NATO, they don't stand a chance. And so if the U.S. withdraws, somebody has to step in, to protect the Kurds there, and I hope that will be Israel, because Turkey does not want a confrontation with Israel, and the U.S. certainly doesn't want two of its allies.
Israelis are aware that Turkey is now their neighbor.
Is what?
Our Israelis know that, like Turkey, as a state of Turkey, is right now the next door, a neighbor of the state of Israel.
Well, we know you mean on literally on our borders?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised. No, Israel is well aware of the Turkish influence, and they know that the Turks are to some extent on our borders, listening to us and everything. So I think Israel is well aware of that, and Israel is well aware of the threat in general that Turkey poses. Whether or not it's doing enough to counter that threat, I don't think it is, honestly. And I think one thing Israel can do, one of the best things Israel can do to counter the threat of Turkey is by protecting the Kurds and other minorities in Syria.
Yeah, like Druze, and then why not Alevis on the Mediterranean coast?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I wrote about this a while back. Right now, Turkey's right on, because Ashar basically a Turk friendly to the is basically almost a Turkish puppet. Basically, they're right on our borders. If we directly supported Rojava, the Kurdish dominant forces there, we'd be on their border, on Turkey's border. Okay, two can play at this game. Okay, if they're gonna be on our borders, we can be on theirs too. But we have to play the game correctly, and we can do that in Rojava. We can also do that in Latakia, which is also right on Turkey's border.
But so also, honestly, Kurds, and especially in Rojava, it's like particularly the last 10 or 12 years, it's been traumatized. Like first, the Russian as a regional power, Russia abandoned the Kurds in Afrin, and we saw what happened to Afrin. Over 400,000 Kurds got displacement, and thousands of the Kurds being killed. I mean, I'm talking about civilian casualties.
Yeah, absolutely.
Besides that, I remember 2019 when Trump got a deal with the Erdogan and was going to hand it over entire Rojava to the Turkey, which has ended up to occupation of the Serikani and a huge chunk of the land right next to the Turkish border. So the Kurds is kind of traumatized because every time if the US decided something or Russia decided something, it could be very, very huge impact on them by all means. So the Kurds are also needed to trust in someone and to cooperate. So yeah. we have been trying that, but unfortunately, so far what I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm gonna give you the plain truth now. Okay. Nobody cares. Most people are not going to care if Kurds get slaughtered. You know why? They can't blame Jews for it. And what I mean is, if we, God forbid, if Israel was slaughtering Kurds, you'd hear about it all over the world.
Yeah, of course. I know that mainstream media. Yeah.
But anybody, the Turks, the other Arabs, they slaughter the Kurds. Nobody cares. You won't see any protests. You won't see any.
That's the hypocrisy of the Western media is no Jews, no news. So we know that's
right. Exactly. Exactly.
I'm very familiar from mainstream media in the US. Like in 2019, I very recall what happened to the Kurds, or 2018 in Afrin, what happened to the Kurds. There wasn't United Nations. There wasn't the mainstream media. No one really mentioned that. Or 2014 when ISIS attacked the Yazidi Kurds.
Media barely mentioned what happened.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. So then the broader perspective, do you think what is holding in the future for state of Israel regarding their security issues, and also what is the holding for Kurds to at least protect their gain in Syria, Kurdistan, in Rojava?
I think Israel needs to forge a much stronger relationship with the Kurds, not because it's in our interests. Okay, it's in Israel's interest. I mean, I think morally it's always a good thing for Israel to support the Kurds, but it's not just morally. It's in Israel's interest to have allies like the Kurds that are strategically located in places where Israel can affect influence. Like I just said, Rojava is right on the border with Turkey. If Israel has a permanent presence in Rojava, we're right on their border, the same way the Turks are right on our border right now, in the form of Al-Sharar's regime. Okay.
As I know from the history, the Kurds is going to deep down their cooperation with State of Israel by the Mullah Mustafa time in 1970s,
Yeah.
and some Israeli forces to train the Kurdish Peshmerga forces in
Yeah.
Iraq and Kurdistan. So actually, in the past, State of Israel have done to kind of helping each other, to understanding each other needs in the region. But later, in like lately after 1980s, that stance has been changed, and there is not really mutual understanding or grasping the importance of the cooperation on the ground for safety of State of Israel and for freedom of and safety of the Kurds. So I think, personally, at this point, what I'm seeing, State of Israel, if doesn't want to repeat all the mistakes, which is going to be like in Gaza and in South Lebanon, in even in Egypt, like in Sinai. So, and Israel has to change their politics towards the Middle East, and this time I think Israel has to get in deep cooperation with the minorities, including Alawis, Druze.
Well, we're in 100% agreement there.
Kurds right now is armed. Kurds are very well trained, well equipped.
Yes.
So if not would be the Turkey, there is no threat for Kurds. So the Syrian regime is not threat for Kurds. I mean, for SDF forces, but the Turkey it is. So
yes, absolutely.
We needed balance to encounter Turkish
yes
aid on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that
we're both in agreement that Israel should be much more supportive of the Kurds and other minorities in Syria, because Israel represents, I think, a great hope for other minorities who struggle for their own independence and self-determination. Who can look at Israel and say, what, if the Jews got their independence back and their sovereignty back, so can we. And I think that's
honestly what I saw with those Sueda. So it is those Druze. It was a massacre, a total mass over.
Yes, absolutely, it was.
And we saw the mainstream media in Europe and in the US.
Mm-hmm.
It's there like honestly like disgusting. They approach those minorities being slaughtered, disgusting. And then Mubarak said, this is the Middle East. There is no democracy. Middle East governed by the families, by the tribes, and so on. So Israel was so only country in stepped up to protect the Druze from a certain humiliation and death. So that's like really meaningful, especially for me. I mean, as a human being. So what Israel did is very worthy to protect the Druze in a certain death, certain massacre. So, but also Israel has to do more, because now our future is lying on depends on our more cooperation.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's. Would you like to add something more, Jason? Thank you so much having.
Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy being here.
Thank you, Jason. Have a great day. Thank you for all those heads up and information. I'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you.